This is the Late Round Podcast with your host, JJ Zacharisa.
What's up, everyone? It's JJ Zacharisa, and in this episode 919 of the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, sponsored by Underdog. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you're checking out what's going on over at Underdog. Fantasy football draft season might be over, but it's not over on Underdog. You can draft teams each week over there based on the slate of games, and those drafts are for all sorts of price points and all different sizes. There's also Pick'em and Champions mode that you can dig into as well. If you want to get in on the action, just head to UnderdogFantasy.com and go sign up. When you sign up, use promo code LATEROUND. That'll get you a free pick, a nice deposit offer, and you'll also get my rest of season rankings. Those rankings are emailed to you from Underdog after you sign up, and they're updated every Tuesday, and you get those updates. That's UnderdogFantasy.com, promo code LATEROUND. There's been a lot of chatter about Tyler Algier and his role for the Falcons in Week 4. If you missed it, Bijan Robinson saw fewer than half of Atlanta's running back carries this past weekend, and Tyler Algier looked good getting the work that he got. And Algier's a good player. Don't take this the wrong way. I'm just admittedly growing a little bit tired of this backup running back is better than his starter takes. We're seeing those fly out there continuously. Not only are we dealing with small sample sizes here, and not only is there more to the running back position than just running the football, but Algier has not seen the same situations that Robinson has. On the season, according to Next Gen Stats, Robinson has faced stacked boxes at an 18% rate this year. 18% of his rushes were against stacked boxes. Tyler Algier is at 3.7%. No relevant running back in football has faced stacked boxes at a lower rate than Tyler Algier. That's not everything, of course, but it does give us some context to his numbers. Now, I was going to have Bijan Robinson as a potential buy candidate this week on the 15 Transaction Show, but he popped up on the injury report. I didn't want to force it. But my stance is that Robinson is still one of the best assets in fantasy football. Algier's a really good backup. He should still be rostered everywhere. But Bijan Robinson is still very, very good. Trey McBride was out this past week, but I do want to call out that Michael Wilson has had some decent target shares over his last two games. In Week 3, we saw Wilson hit a 26.5% target share against the Lions. In Week 4, it was 31.8% against Washington. He hasn't been massively productive, but it's something to monitor and take note of. Now, speaking of Arizona, Kyler Murray had an unbelievably disappointing outing in Week 4 against Washington. Not only did he not throw the ball as well as we'd hoped for, but he only had one rush attempt. He had 5 rush attempts in all 3 of his other contests this season. Murray should see more rush attempts moving forward, but he also, unfortunately, has the 3rd toughest schedule among fantasy quarterbacks over the next month plus. They get matchups against the 49ers, Packers, Chargers, Dolphins, Bears, and Jets. They've got a bottom 10 quarterback schedule from here on out, so keep that in mind as you evaluate him. I was high on Jordan Whittington after Cooper Kupp went down in Week 2, and then in Week 3, he didn't show us a ton of promise, at least from a usage standpoint. Week 4, though, was a totally different story. Whittington ran a route on 97% of LA's dropbacks. That was a team high. And he didn't play the slot either. According to PFF, just 29% of his routes were out of the slot. They were rotating their wide receivers all over the field. That resulted in Whittington getting a 30% target share. Meanwhile, Tutu Atwell has been the consistent piece in that offense ever since that Cooper Kupp injury. He's seen route participation rates of 83% and 91% over his last 2 games. His target shares have been over 20% in each contest. So I think Atwell's the safer investment in the short term. But Whittington's not a bad look in deeper formats. You guys know that I like looking at adjusted fantasy points allowed to help with upcoming matchups. But I also like looking at it in hindsight to see the kind of schedule that a player or team has had thus far. One thing that's kind of interesting is that Seattle, despite looking pretty good offensively this year, they face kind of a brutal schedule across the board. They've seen the 2nd toughest one for quarterbacks, the toughest one for running backs, and a bottom 5 schedule for wide receivers. That's after facing Denver, who's been really strong defensively this year, then New England, Miami, and Detroit. I think you could argue that this entire unit is kind of a bye. Ryan Grubb has been a really strong addition to this offense. The team is 5th in yards per play and 11th in EPA per play. And that's despite facing some tougher matchups. Calvin Ridley's kind of been disappointing to start the season. He's run around on 85% of Tennessee's dropbacks, but he's seen just 17% of the team's targets. He does fortunately rank in the top 15 in air yard share across the league. That's good at least. Now, part of the reason for that is schedule. I'll mention it again. When I did my schedule analysis a couple of months ago, I called out Tennessee as having a brutal schedule to start the season. And we've seen that so far. Their quarterbacks by adjusted fantasy points allowed have seen the toughest schedule. Their wide receivers have seen the 3rd toughest schedule. Fortunately, from now through the end of the year, everything flips. Tennessee's wideouts have the 2nd best schedule. Their quarterbacks rank 1st. That's especially going to hit during the second half of the year. The short term's not amazing, but I'm still expecting better numbers from the offense during the second half of the season. Make sure you're not letting an anchoring bias dictate how you feel about this offense. Part of the reason for Mark Andrews' poor performance to start this season is that the Ravens have targeted their running backs a lot. They have a 25% running back target share so far this year. That's one of the highest in the league. But it's also way, way higher than what we've typically seen from a Lamar Jackson-led offense. During the Jackson era, the Ravens have topped out at a 16.6% running back target share. They're basically almost 10 percentage points higher this year than their previous high with Lamar Jackson. I don't think things will continue at this current pace. It doesn't take away from their pass catchers and the unpredictability that those pass catchers are going to bring. But it's one of the only positives that you can look at if you do have one of those pass catchers. The Rashee Rice injury could be exactly what Travis Kelce needed to see production. The two of them occupy a similar area of the field, and the Chiefs were opting to go with a Rice-heavy approach. It's no coincidence that Travis Kelce saw his target share skyrocket in Week 4. It was 32%. In his 3 games prior, he hadn't reached half of that mark. So if you have Kelce, the Rice injury is going to be a big boost. Wide receivers are scoring a touchdown this year for about every 164 receiving yards. So when a wideout gets about 164 yards, he generally scores a touchdown. Now, obviously there's more to it, but yards to touchdowns is a very easy way to spot regression. Right now, the wide receiver with the most yards who hasn't scored is George Pickens. He has 284 receiving yards without a touchdown. You can consider him a regression candidate and a possible buy candidate. The last trend this week is that Chase Brown saw his highest running back rush share of the season against Carolina. He had a total 50-50 split with Zach Moss on the ground. Now, Moss was still more involved in the passing game. But as I've said with Brown, you have to just be patient. Nothing may come of it, but Brown has been really good on the ground this year. He currently leads the NFL in success rate at 65.5%. That's according to Next Gen Stats. And among all running backs across the league, he's best in expected points added per rush. For some comparison, Moss has a 35% success rate. Remember, Chase Brown is at 65.5%. Moss's EPA per rush is minus 0.09. Chase Brown plus 0.25. If the Bengals just trust him a little bit more in pass protection, Brown could go nuts in fantasy football. That's it for today's show, though. Thanks to all of you for listening. If you've yet subscribed to the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, make sure you are by searching for it pretty much anywhere podcasts can be found. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter at LateRoundQB, and make sure you're subscribed to the Late Round Fantasy Football YouTube channel, youtube.com/@LateRoundFF. Thanks for listening, everyone. I'll talk to you tomorrow with the weekly Sleeper Show.